Welcome to episode 2 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin. We played through the prologue of Trails in the Sky. That's what this episode is about. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to break it down. We're going scene by scene. Well, not scene by scene. We're going plot beat by plot beat. We're talking game systems. We're talking characters. We're talking plot. We're talking how do we like certain characters. We're talking everything because we want to do a deep dive into this game, and that means we got to take it slow. We want to make sure that we talk about what we want to talk about without feeling like we're pressured.
Okay, so this game is, quite from a while ago, 18 years, published June 2004. Not even PC. It's the first installment of the 9-game Trails series,
which is part of a larger series, The Legend of Heroes. But luckily, other than like one game that was released later than this, we'll talk about that a long time ago, like a long time from now. But the Legend of Heroes games are distinct from Trails. They're part of the same series, but you don't have to play any of the previous Legend of Heroes games to get this.
And so we begin with Estelle as a child. She's about 11 years old. She's been home alone for a couple days, and then her father, Cassius, brings in a stray, Joshua, and says, well, he's going to be adopted in this family from now on. And there's a lot to talk about this scene, about what it represents, what it's set up. But holy shit, this 11-year-old girl is living alone in her house for a couple of days, maybe a week or longer.
I mean, to be fair, when I was 12, I've been left alone for a week once. I spent most of it on the computer playing video games. I didn't burn the house down. It is within the realm of possibility. And Cassius, we know through playing the prologue that he goes off on business sometime. This isn't something that's particularly new. What is new is the present that Cassius brings her. Because it's not like Cassius says, oh, by the way, I'm just adopting this kid. He says, I have a present for you, Estelle. And then Estelle looks at it and says, why is my present a boy? And I think that line just perfectly encapsulates the character of Estelle in a single sentence. She's brash. She's not afraid to react in surprise. But at the same time, then when we see her actually relate to Joshua, try to figure out what his name is, teach him some manners, yada, yada. You also see how she can form relationships quite quickly with people that just enter her life.
So on the one hand, we have a fairly typical JRPG convention of, someone young having what I think is way too much, adult type responsibility thrust upon them, living alone. But at the other time, it's a really interesting inversion of the traditional gender expectations and gender roles for, a game that's going to be mostly played by, I'd say, teens and, males, teenage boys in particular.
Well, now it might be like middle-aged men. The gaming demographic is starting to get a little bit old.
Estelle is, inquisitive. She's brash. She's loud. Those are most of the traits you would associate with, shonen protagonists for an anime with the male player unit. But it's not given to the boy. It's not given to Joshua. It's given to this person we just got introduced to in the first scene, to Estelle Bright.
In contrast, Joshua is very quiet. Now, of course, he's coming in injured, right? We don't know why he's injured. I know why he's injured, but you don't know why he's injured. Cassius Bright seems to have rescued him and tells him while he's recovering on this bed that he's welcome to stay there. And then we have a time skip of about 5 years where he's come into the family. But you can tell during that first scene that Joshua he's very reticent to talk about himself. He's confused by the fact that he's been saved. It's like he doesn't expect to have been saved. And yet there's Cassius Bright putting him into bed, Estelle making sure that he's okay. That seems to be against his expectation.
I mean, he's reticent. That's a really good way to describe it. Doesn't seem to have much value on himself. He asks, why save me? Implicit, why save someone like me? Because this Cassius Bright, Estelle's father, Joshua's now adopted father, he was called a bracer. He fights monsters, he fights evil, does work for the government, for private citizens. It's an independent, paramilitary almost organization.
But we haven't gotten to the bracer part yet. We're going to talk more about bracers when we do the time skip, because 5 years go by. And we wake up, Estelle's waking up, she listens to Joshua play The Whereabouts of Light, which is basically the song you hear in the intro cutscene. And it's a motif that comes up throughout the rest of the game. It's a fantastic song. We might talk about the OST a little bit later on. But they finally go down for breakfast. and they're talking to Cassius, and it's revealed that they also want to be bracers, that Joshua and Estelle are going to be bracers, and they're going to take their exam that afternoon.
Okay, so why not start the game here? Why not have, oh yeah, by the way, my adopted brother or something, why have this couple minute foray into the past?
I think that the reason why is because the game needs to stress Joshua's mysterious past. We've seen a couple of times the prologue, and I'll point them out as I remember them, but I'm sure that you'll bring some of them too. Joshua is not a normal person. He knows things that he shouldn't know. He reacts to things in ways that he shouldn't. And I think without the prologue, we would react negatively to that. We'd be like, what the hell's going on with this character? But we're already primed by the very first intro scene to say something is off about this guy. He has mysterious origins. We need to figure out what they are.
I'll accept that under provisional terms for the moment.
Well, I know what I'm talking about, just so you know.
Okay. Estelle and Joshua eat breakfast and they go to the headquarters of this guild of bracers, of monster hunters, of people who fight for the light, as it were.
Yeah, they describe themselves as fighters for justice. I think a paramilitary group, as you put it, it's not quite the case because they are officially sanctioned, at least by the governments of Liberl, Crossbell, Calvard. You'll remember from Trails of Cold Steel, they're not really sanctioned by Erebonia, but that doesn't matter. The point, they are an official organization, but at the same time, they also make it their point to not get, like, they can be hired on behalf of the state, though they reserve the right to refuse. But something that we learned pretty early on is that they also have an obligation to not get involved in affairs of state.
We'll get into this later. But to me, no government worthy of the name would ever accept an organization like the Bracers having so much independent power and autonomy.
Yeah, we will get into that a bit more because that's more in-depth discussion about the nature of governments. And I do want to talk about that. But it is interesting how it's not even just the Kingdom of Liberl that has them. Like, they're all over Zemuria.
The continent.
Yes, Zemuria is the name of the continent. So the reason why we're talking about who the bracers are, as we said, Joshua and Estelle, they're testing to become a bracer. And their mentor is a woman named Sherazard Harvey, Shara. And Shara gives you a nice big info dump on here's who the bracers are, here's what the Kingdom of Liberl is, here's the Orbital Revolution. We'll talk about courts and Orbital stuff in a minute. But Shara is a former student of Cassius. She goes by the nickname the Silver Streak. She plays this mentorship role to Estelle and Joshua. And she says, all right, I've been training you long enough. It's my job as a senior bracer to train newbies. Now you have two tasks. First, we have to fit in your orbits, and you're going to do your practical exam. So let's talk about
keep in mind here, the mentor figure is 24 max.
No, she's like 23, 24 at this point.
The experienced monster hunter and fighter is 24, 23.
Well, she's experienced in other ways too, Kevin Bloomfield, as we know, as she mentions many times.
Yeah, I mean, about orbs and quartz and orb mints, that's one of the really unique, really interesting ways the Trails series distinguishes itself for the gameplay, for how the gameplay interacts and connects to the societal themes and the technology and all that in a way that we don't really see that's similar in games, a lot of RPGs. So could you talk a bit more about that, Colin?
Yeah, sure. Essentially, the Orbital Revolution is the discovery of being able to use a stone called Septium in order to power things. We can easily think of this as an analog to the Industrial Revolution. You had a medieval kingdom before, and now we live in a world that has basic technology. It's not quite as advanced as our world is today. A plot point later on down the road will be the development of something akin to the internet, but that does not exist in these first three games. That's not here. But we do have, basic electricity. We have the cars do exist, although I don't know if you see them. So you have basic technology. But what's more important from a gameplay perspective, bracers and other figures have something called an orbment. An orbment is a device in which you can put quartz stones into that will allow you to perform magic arts. The other kind of skill that you can use is called crafts, so you can do arts and crafts. And it took me way too long to realize that that was a pun. The reason why the court system is an interesting system to use as a player, the amount of combinations that you can put into there in order, which basically decides what your stats are to a degree, and what spells you have. It's incredibly customizable, and it's one of those things that the game can give you quartz as rewards for, like, finding in this chest, or you can buy them, or you can do whatever, and that will directly add to your ability to create player power. It's not just saying, here's a stat increase. You still have to do something with it. And then you can plan out your build to make these characters the way that you want them to be.
Yeah, it's a really great way of, I mean, there's natural character growth, but customization, fighter, mage, dodge tank, support, certain characters will naturally fall into certain types of play styles, but there's a lot of great customization that you don't really see except for maybe the Fire Emblem games.
I don't think you get any. Fire Emblem does not have the amount of customization that this has. You're thinking of Three Houses, which does. That's the only one that does. No, this kind of customization, you do see it in games like the re-release of Final Fantasy X, in which you can kind of go wherever you want on the sphere grid, for instance. That's one way you could look at it. If we're talking about the JRPG, Western JRPG distinction we made in the last game, the court system is one of those things that's more akin to a Western RPG than JRPG, because it gives you so much more options than most of them do.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at, one Elder Scrolls. You can be whatever you want in whatever order. You can change, from any kind of character, assassin archer to be any other kind of character, including assassin archer.
We have to see if we can find a character that can be your assassin archer. I think there's one coming up in the second game. His name is Kevin. All right, so we talked about quartz and ordnance. Shara brings Josh and Estelle to the ordnance shop in order to do that, and then she directs them to the sewers. Every JRPG has a sewer level. You're almost kind of glad that it's happening now, so that it gets out of the way, so you don't have the sewer level anymore. And the point of this is to introduce us to the combat system and to the dungeon exploration system. The goal is to get to the end of this very, very basic dungeon and open up a chest, which will contain some boxes that Joshua and Estelle are supposed to bring back up to Shara and not open them under any circumstances, which Estelle really wants to open them, but luckily is able to keep her impulses in check. Kevin, I'm curious to know what you think. What do you think about the combat system? Because this is where we're first introduced to it.
I thought one of the things the combat does with the spatial element, where you have range, but you can move around, say, a chessboard of spaces. Essentially, it's really good. It's not some turn-based combat where you can attack anyone for the most part. They can attack you, but it makes the movement a more strategic part. That's always great to see. To allow the player to have different types of elements and factors to consider in a successful versus unsuccessful combat strategy.
No, I agree. We don't see this skill right now in this tutorial section, but later on in the prologue, Estelle learns the craft Hurricane, in which you can pick a place and it'll hit all of the enemies in that AoE range. And once you learn that skill, the combat system starts to really excel. Beforehand, it's just, okay, you run up to an enemy and you hit it, and that's it. But once you enter the fact that Estelle can now hit enemies multiple enemies at once if they're in the right place, and later Joshua is going to get a skill that does a similar thing in a line. That's when we start saying, like, oh, there's way, way more depth to this combat system than a typical turn-based RPG like a Final Fantasy. The other thing that makes this combat system stand out to me is the ability to manipulate turn order. What's really important about that, it's not just manipulating turn order, it's the fact that there are random bonuses that will be assigned to different characters depending on their turn, such as guaranteed critical hit, or strength up, or HP healing. Later on, we're going to see there's some negative stuff as well that you want to avoid. But you are able to use something called an S break, that you can activate it at any time and it'll instantly become your turn, which means that you can then say, oh, there's a critical hit coming up. I'm going to wait, and then bam, now I have the critical hit, not the enemy. Or you can even use that to push an enemy down to a negative status once we start seeing those. So there's a lot of like turn by turn decisions that we have to make, even when it's not our turn.
And that's always great when the game trusts the player enough to present options for building a successful combat mechanic strategy in a variety of ways besides bring the red bar down to zero. Another great thing about the combat is how it matches the personalities. Estelle is brash. She's outgoing, she's energetic and curious and eager, and she's the main melee fighter. She fights with a staff, has very physical crafts that, draw the attention of enemies, whereas her stepbrother Joshua, he's essentially the mage.
No,
he casts, spells.
Joshua is not a mage. I'm sorry, that is just not true. He can cast spells, so can Estelle, but he's more of a rogue character.
Okay, he's not the frontline tank.
No, he's not a tank. But like the only S-craft you can use at the beginning is him swinging his swords twice. No, I mean, Shara is more the mage. We'll talk about her when she becomes part of the party. No, it is interesting to see how the personalities of Estelle and Joshua are reflected in their characters. I mean, you're absolutely right about Estelle. And then with Joshua, like, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, and we're going to talk about this later, is that he knows things that he shouldn't. He's too good at things than he should be given his age and given what we know about his upbringing. So the fact that he can attack twice when Estelle could only attack once, or the fact that his S-break is him like coming out of the shadows and doing a rogue assassination, whereas Estelle's is, I'm going to hit you real hard with a big stick, which is probably a quote from later in the game. It is time for ultra violence, as she might say. While gameplay wise, they mostly do the same thing. Theme-wise, it shows the strength and backgrounds of these characters.
So we're in the sewers, a blessedly short amount of time.
Yes. By the way, everyone should know that when you open up a chest, you should always check the chest again, because there will be humorous messages in there. But yes, we finished this practical exam. Estelle and Joshua brings the boxes to Shara, and Shara says, congratulations, there's no signs of tampering, you passed. Opens them, and what's in the boxes that was in the chest, they're bracer badges. Estelle and Joshua are now junior bracers.
So the next bit is they have to go to a tower. And the reason is because of this, kids they ran into beforehand took off wandering on their own to what's called a smellless tower.
Yeah.
Filled with monsters.
The tower is filled with monsters. Ina wanted Joshua and Estelle to go like tell Cassius about it, but there was no time. They decided, screw it, we're junior bracers, we got to go save them right now.
This allows the player to see the overworld travel. That's pretty typical of JRPGs and RPGs in general. You're avoiding or trying to hit the random monster encounters, go from one map area to the next, and it's by the numbers, not much to say there, unless you found something worthy of comment, Colin.
I mean, I always enjoy it when JRPGs eschew the random encounters formula. I have nothing against random encounters, but the fact that you can see enemies on the overworld and avoid them or hit them from behind, that is something that I enjoy.
Yeah, it's not some, JRPGs, you're walking, and then, oh shit, it's a random encounter. You had no idea it was going to come. I don't want to do it. I'm over leveled. Just get through it as quick as possible.
Now, sometimes there are times when you have like people trailing behind you, and then that means that the enemy can get to you anyway. But at the very least, then it's like, okay, well, the enemy attacked me. But we get to Esmelis Tower. I'm be curious to know what you chose, because you get in there, you see that the two kids are under attack, and you have two options. You have either Estelle rushes in by herself to save them, or Estelle and Joshua go in together. Which one did you choose?
Well, I chose Estelle rushes in by herself. I thought it was going to be one of those fake choices where no matter what you pick, the same thing happens. So I thought, oh, Estelle is the type to go barging in before stopping to think.
That's what I did the first time I played it too. And you're right that narratively it's a false choice because the same thing happens. But gameplay-wise, it's actually a choice that you have to make. There's a correct choice. And that is to wait for Joshua. That when you turn in this quest, because this is a mission, but when you turn in missions, you get something called Bracer Points, BP. There's a base level that you get, and then you can get extra. And for this mission, if you picked the second choice, you get an extra point. What do you
Wouldn't
mean?
it
Why
make
is
more
that?
sense? I mean, why is that the correct choice? Wouldn't it make more sense to see two people about to be cornered by monsters, two kids about to be attacked by monsters? Wouldn't the best choice to be step right in right away and save them?
So I think Cassius makes this point afterwards, if you made that choice, which is that you're incredibly reckless by running in alone without somebody to watch your back. Now, when to be fair, when I did it the first time, I assumed that Joshua would watch my back. So to me, that was already taken care of. But on the whole, in terms of like what you should be doing as a bracer fighting in a unit, the correct choice is to rush in together so you can defend one another. The reason why I say that Cassius points things out is you beat the enemies, you save the two kids. Then there's another monster that comes in afterwards that's going to attack Estelle. And for some reason, Estelle can't turn around and fight it. It doesn't look like it's going to be that powerful, but okay. But then all of a sudden, bam, here comes Cassius, Deus Ex Machina Cassius. Not the last time Cassius is going to come in Deus Ex Machina.
I liked, that scene for the admonition, for the rebuke Cassius gives Estelle, his daughter, saying that you're young, you can't take everything, you need to ask for help if you need it. It's not something that we see often in RPGs and JRPGs where the adult says, you need to take things a bit slower and he's proven right. Usually it's a sign that the protagonist, the hero, they can save the day all by themselves. They are the chosen one, the prophecy, whatever. Relying on others, cooperation and teamwork, that's the adult way of going about things.
This is going to sound like a weird comparison, but in Pokemon Black and White, one of your rivals is a girl who just wants to like get out. And of course, in Pokemon, everyone's like 10 years old. And the dad is like, what? You want to explore the entire world filled with dangerous people and Pokemon that can kill you in a single breath? I do not want my daughter to do that. So he spends the whole game like trying to catch up to his daughter to take her back home. And the game makes it seem like he's the bad guy. And yet anybody over the age of 16 will feel like the dad's right. This is a dangerous situation. So after that mission, Josh and Estelle, they have to report back to the Bracers Guild to report in this mission. And that's what I was talking about. Every time a Bracer takes a mission, they have to report it. And when you report it, you get money and you get BP. Money is important because monster battles don't give you money. They do give you septium, which you can, or give you quartz, which you can turn in to money, but you're not going to want to for a long time because you have to like do that in order to use your different skills. So this is your main source of money. And also BP will increase your bracer rank. And every time you increase rank, you get a reward of some kind. It might be a rare piece of quartz or a rare piece of equipment or something like that. But it's a constant, like there's a reason why you want to shoot for high BP because you're going to get rewarded for doing so.
Colin, you forgot another reason why it's important to get money.
Why is it important to get money, Kevin?
As the great Homer once said, money can be exchanged for goods and or services.
Is this Homer the Greek poet or Homer the Simpsons character?
I don't think it's important to specify which.
I don't think it's Homer the poet, I have to say. Mostly because I don't think Homer the poet exists.
So we get the first main mission of the prologue. Joshua and Estelle have to go to the Pertzel farm outside town.
We missed a step. We turn in this mission about the two boys in the Esmeralda Tower. Ina gives us a letter to deliver to Cassius. Cassius reads that letter and says, oh shit, I have to leave. Joshua and Estelle, take my job for me. Take all of my requests.
So it's the standard, okay, remove the much more experienced, powerful, older, wiser character to allow the two protagonists time to develop, show their skills. Because otherwise it would be, okay, let's give all of these missions to Cassius.
Right, which they've been doing. And then he has to leave. So there's like a big hole that needs to be filled. And that's where, like, if you think about it, the entire prologue happened in one day. Maybe it was 2 days in the Pertzel farms. It happens overnight. So, Kevin, what is our first mission?
They go to this farm outside, the Pertzel farm, and they're fighting some monsters that are eating the crops. That's told to the player that, hey, this could impact the food supply for the town, which raises a whole bunch of horrifying questions about the world of JRPGs and the Trails in the Sky in particular. Okay, so one question I have. You have monsters roaming about the road, making it dangerous to travel overland. Making so monsters tapping the food supply seems to be a common occurrence. How do you have any trade, any movement of people, of goods? How do you have government between cities with the world as it is?
Well,
How is this not a dystopia?
I think that question is answered by one of the side quests. I don't know if you did the side quest because I don't know what side quests you've done. In terms of the monsters that
Colin,
what
Colin,
what
how often would you be driving to Florida if there was a chance? Oh, yeah, by the way, if the street lights out, you're probably going to die by eldritch monsters attacking the car.
man, I've already driven to Florida too much, and I've only driven to Florida twice this year, and already I think that's too much. I mean, I understand your point. I do, but I think that's another one of those needs that the Bracer Guild fulfills. Bracers are hired to escort people. We'll see that later in the game. I think actually really soon. Also, the Purtzell
So
farm.
if you're poor, tough luck.
Yeah, it's the real world, man. Like it's not the case in the real world. Come on.
This There's a lot of unintentional horrifying stuff about, I mean, not just this, but so many standard RPG settings. Bandits and monsters aren't
Oh yeah,
treated like, wow, it's awful.
like most JRPGs, especially those that star young kids, have like 12-year-olds stabbing people. That's a traumatic experience, but they're never traumatized by it. Then, like halfway through the game, they'll have to realize, oh, I killed a person. They're like, no, dude, you killed a lot more people before and right now.
No, I can't kill the enemy. I'll be as bad as him. Okay, yeah, sure, but the 50 mooks you met on the way to the evil chasm.
No, that's
Okay.
fine. But speaking of killing the mooks, that's an important part of the Purtzell farm thing. So they hire the bracers for extermination because they have the problem with these monsters that are eating the crops. They don't know what to do, so they hire them for extermination. I would disagree with you, Kevin. I don't think it's a normal occurrence, but it's not an unheard of one. Josh and Estelle, they spend the night because they come out there. The monsters come out there around midnight time. You have this scene between Estelle and her childhood friend Tio that's talking a bit about how all the girls really like Joshua. And she's surprised that Estelle hasn't fallen in love with Joshua. And Estelle, this triggers something in Estelle to like want to consider Joshua's feelings a bit more. She wants Joshua.
Feelings.
Yeah, I mean, let me finish what I'm saying.
For her brother.
Let me finish what I'm saying. I'm not talking about that, although that's going to happen. But at the moment, Estelle wants Joshua to open up to her about that kind of stuff, about other people, not falling in love with Estelle, but falling in love with other people, interested, whatever. And so that's something that she says that she wants Joshua to be more open with her. So they fight the monsters, and then Estelle intervenes at the end and says, "We shouldn't kill them, even though they're hired to kill them. We've taught them their lesson." She has her Susan Collins moment. They learned their lesson. They've learned from this. They're not going to do it again. and everyone around her is like the people hiring her are hiring the bracers to kill them are fine with it, except Joshua. Joshua's like, why would we let them live? It's stupid to let them live. They should die. And then he's overruled and the monsters flee. And Joshua turns to Estelle later that night. For some reason, now they're sleeping in the same bedroom. Joshua says, I feel no compassion. It's like I'm broken on the inside. I want to hear your reaction to that scene, Kevin. What did you think when you read that?
One thing I thought, are they codependent in an unhealthy way?
I don't think in an unhealthy way, no.
Because, I mean, I thought it was natural. It really fits his character. But so often in media, the serious, reserved, reticent character, it's a lot of times the really mature kid, one who's very serious, quiet, really like not into the normal kind of thing. That's not something went wrong sometimes somewhere for that kid with their environment, their family, whatever. So this admission, this confession here that this one of the first hints that there's something really deeply wrong in some ways about Joshua or how he relates to the world, that really intrigued me. I thought it was very well done.
Well, I'm glad that you think that, because the reason why I brought up this scene is because this is a very important foreshadowing scene. So I just wanted to make sure that you paid attention to that. But no, I agree with you that just given what we know, we know that Josh has has this mysterious past, right? We know there was some violence involved. And now we see him acting 5 years later in this family unit where he does, like, he's wrong to say that he doesn't have compassion because he shows compassion for Estelle, I believe earlier than the scene, but certainly later than the scene too. But it's how he conceives of himself as being broken. That is the interesting thing.
Yeah, it's a very negative self-conception. He doesn't think he's really worthy.
I want to move on from this before I reveal why he feels that way, because I do know that, and you will find out in time. So we finished that mission. The second main story mission is to visit the mayor of the town of Roland. The mayor would like Estelle and Joshua to visit the Mulga mine and pick up some. In particular, they're going to pick up a septium crystal that's very rare and valuable in order to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. This was not planned, given that Elizabeth's Jubilee was like yesterday, but that's basically what's happening. It's the Queen's 60th birthday, so the town of Roland will be giving her a present to show their appreciation. But while they're trying to acquire it, a cave-in occurs, opening a monster's den. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Kevin. I want to get your reaction because there are some interesting characters in the Mulga mine. And I think this is a good place for me to assert the fact that it really makes this world richer if you talk to every NPC, because they're like a lot of random NPCs have a lot of depth to them. And what's even more interesting about this game in particular is that every time you turn in a main story mission, all the dialogue for all of the NPCs change. Yeah. In any case, so what did you think about the miners that were in there? Because I think there's some interesting characters there.
Some of the ones I found really interesting. So you go to a mine to get this really rare gem, and unsurprisingly, stuff goes down and monsters attack. Again, that's the red thread. A lot of monsters attacking in lots of places in this game. And we see some really interesting miners, how they react to the monsters. One starts praying, Aidios, Aidios, who I assume is a god, Jesus. Yeah, and then one of the other miners with him is really against this over-reliance on the divine for safety, insults him, mocks him. And it's really interesting, I thought, because a lot of JRPGs, a lot of media, they don't treat religion as something important in people's lives.
Yeah.
Take Game of Thrones. You never hardly ever get to feel that they believed, they knew the faith of the Seven was real. They knew it with the core of their being. It was an important, integral part of their life. You don't get that.
Yeah, I mean,
Not really.
You do for the peasants in the Song of Ice and Fire novels.
But everyone should be thinking this. Most everyone should be thinking that. Like Cersei knocking over the sept of Baelor she should have been, killed within the day.
I will say that George R.R. Martin is better at having that kind of description of religious faith when we're talking about the Northmen and the Old Gods. Because I did feel like Ned Stark truly believed in the Old Gods. Certainly Jon Snow did too.
Faith of the Seven, the Catholic Church analog, we don't get the idea that people really believed in it. But this is a Trails in the Sky podcast. So back to the game we are ostensibly discussing. It's a quiet aside that people really do believe in the religion in this game.
Yes. You had texted me that this is another JRPG in which religion plays a very minor role. And I replied back with, no, you will find out you are wrong about that. The Church of Aidios is really important. And it's not just in this game. In fact, I would say that this is the game where it's the least important. It just gets more important the more and more we play.
I'm super excited to see it then.
You'll really like Trails the Third then. So
other than that, yeah, I mean, that's the one that really sticks out for the miners. I didn't pay that much attention.
I mean, I just wanted to ask that question, to see who you talk to, and then to spark this conversation about the religion in the game, because I think it's important. The other interesting character through this is that there's a miner who's a trainee. He's an apprentice. He only joined the day before. He's not supposed to be down there, but he is anyway. It turns out that he accidentally caused this cave-in that caused the monster den to be open. And it's revealed that as soon as he got out, like he booked it. He was afraid. He left. That is an important thing for reasons that we will get to as we finish the plot of the prologue. But Luckily, we do save everybody. We get the Septium Crystal. We bring it back to the mayor. Visiting the mayor is a character named Josette. Josette is a student at the Yenis Royal Academy. She claims to be moving around the Kingdom of Aburl for her independent studies. This is not the first time that you could see her. If you went to the church before this mission to do a side mission for Father Divine, she's there as well. And she's been in the hotel beforehand as well. So you could have run into her a couple of times. But this is when she becomes story important. And so she witnesses the handing over of the stone to the mayor, who puts it into the safe. What did you think of Josette when you first met her?
I didn't think that much about her. I thought the idea of the Royal Academy was a cool bit of world building. I assume that we're going to visit in some game in the Trails
You'll
series.
visit in this game. You'll visit in this game.
I thought she might be a party member, if only because she had such clear and distinct portraits with different expressions. And that's one thing this game does really well, the portraits. Because you can't emote much with sprites, but the expression, the facial expression, from the shoulders up on the portraits, do such a good job of portraying what they're thinking, what they're reacting in a scene, in the dialogue, and what say you, especially Estelle.
Oh, I'm about to say, like, especially Estelle's. Her face of like, are you fucking kidding me? That is fantastic art right there. I'd hang that on my wall.
The slit eyes, the blank expression. Yeah, it's great. So I thought, Gisette would be a party member at some point.
The reason why I asked is because our two characters walk away with two different reactions to Josette. And I didn't notice this the first time I played it, but I do notice it having played it again. Estelle, obviously, she likes Josette. We could be great friends. I hope we run into each other again, yada, yada. But Joshua is very reticent around her. Like, there's a lot of ... bubbles. He is...
Is that the word of the day for you?
I think it is. I mean, we're talking about Joshua here. It kind of makes a little bit of sense, reticent. But no, while he does not outright say anything negative about Josette, he does withhold positive statements in a way that the game calls attention to it. Do you have anything you want to say more now, or should we move on to the third mission?
One thing I like about the different reactions to Josette is that Estelle doesn't feel like threatened by the presence of a, outgoing, independent, conventionally attractive woman. It's not this degrading to this cattiness, but it's like, yeah, she's cool. It'd be cool to be friends with her.
Yeah, that's true. It would be interesting to see a bit of the cattiness, because that can be a real phenomenon. Not every woman feels that way, but it can happen. And we'll see a little bit of that in a moment when we get to the end of the prologue, I think. But you're absolutely right. She doesn't come off as feeling threatened by Josette. She's very, outgoing, warm towards this person that she just met, which we've already seen her do with Joshua, and now she's doing it with Josette. The third mission is to escort two reporters from the Liberal News, Niall and Dorothy. Players will have already seen the Liberal News a little bit, because when Josh and Estelle go into Roland to take their exam, Cassius tells them, hey, buy me an issue of the Liberal News. You don't have to buy it, but almost everybody's going to. And you do that, you can read the newspaper. Something I love about this game is how the amount of books that are there. I think I missed something, but you can get the first chapter of a novel series that's present in these books that we'll talk about at some point. But also, there are regularly issues of the Liberal News that reports on events that have happened throughout the entire kingdom. And it's a really effective way at building the world, because this place feels like a real lived-in country.
So many fantasy. Okay, I'm sorry, but so much fantasy especially feels a mile wide and inch deep. Like, there's nothing beyond what we can see as the protagonists.
Yes. And Trails does a very good job of avoiding that problem, I think.
It's a great job of, you're in the middle of something that's been going on.
Yeah.
It's not this big conspiracy, but it's a whole history that's not impacted by what you do.
Right. You live in this inhabited world. Now you get to learn about it and experience it. They're supposed to escort Niall and Dorothy. Niall is a reporter. He's very gruff looking. He always has a cigarette in his mouth. So automatically I'm like, that's my guy. Whereas Dorothy is like this absent-minded photographer that like breaks a lot of stuff. She runs into problems. She tried to get her camera repaired at the Orbment shop. Then she broke something. So then she didn't have enough money to replace both. Niall has to come in and pay for it out of pocket, which kind of reveals that he is a big softy on the inside, even with this rough exterior. They want to go to Esmilus Tower, this same place where we did our first mission to save the two boys. They want to go to the top of the tower in order to take pictures of the entire Rolent region. You go through the Mulga Trail, you go through the Tower of Esmilus. This is really the first time that you have a real dungeon. There are treasure chests around the place. There's even a treasure chest, I don't know if you found this, but where you open it and monsters appear and you have to fight those monsters, and you get a good piece of equipment. But it's a little bit more dangerous because these monsters explode when you kill them, which was a lot of fun to realize when I first played, because all the characters are melee, and then I died. But this is really introducing you to what dungeons are like in the game. A couple of branching pathways to find treasure chests, but pretty straightforward overall. And then you get to the top of the tower, where Joshua calls out to a guy that you can't see, who reveals himself. His name is Alba. Kevin, I want to get your opinion on Alba.
As a historian, I'm surprised that Alba could, make it up, wasn't eating crayons, and the other things that archaeologists have to do. He seemed like a pretty stock character of the scholar who hints at something larger, something maybe mystical, bigger that time forgot, something plot spanning that's going to be coming up about the climax, or maybe before the climax. With the MacGuffin, the Aureole, Aureole. Be very careful how you spell that, typing it in. And we just felt kind of there. I didn't pay him much attention, really.
Couple of things. The first is I thought that the Aureole, or however you pronounce it, was a fake word. And then I was reading for work today, Michael Kulikowski's book on Roman cities in Spain, and he uses that word. It's a legit word. Apparently, it's what how in medieval paintings, holy figures have like the halo around their head? That is what that refers to. That's the aureole. Or the aureole, whatever. Not the...
I thought it was something different. Okay.
So, but I want to stay on this because this is an important thing. I thought exactly the same way that you did the first time I played it. And I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil things. All I'm going to say is that with the context of this game and the second game, this scene is filled with import. Like, it is an incredibly important scene. You can tell how much they planned things far ahead in terms of how different characters react to this guy and the stuff that he's talking about. That blew me away, that I didn't realize how planned these things were. And now having the context, I think that is probably the most important scene in the entire prologue. And I didn't think that way when I first played it.
Joshua feels nauseous, tells Estelle he is all right. And then we get skipping back to town where the Alba and reporters take their leave.
They turn in that mission, and then the mayor brushes into the Bracer's office and announces that he has been robbed. The quartz has been stolen, the one that we recovered for him. And so Sherazard joins us. Estelle and Joshua and Shara go to the mayor's house to do an investigation.
And when I was going through all the clues, I felt so astute, thinking to myself, I bet that thief was the person we saw in the mayor's office, Josette, that student. And I just got my first twist. Until 5 minutes later, the game says the thief is most likely Josette. Yeah. Go find her.
It's pretty clear from the beginning that Josh knows it's Josette, but you only put those two dots together when you actually figured it out for yourself. But this is another one of those scenes that reveals that Josh knows things that he shouldn't, right? So we see this safe, and Josh looks at it and says, oh, they used a certain kind of powder to determine what the combination was, and that's how they stole it. And then he takes out a blue light, and he finds out that he's correct. Number one, what 16-year-old's holding a blue light And number two, what kind of 16-year-old knows that? And Estelle even says, how do you know these things? It kind of goes off because we expect Joshua to have this kind of knowledge at this point. It's clearly he's highly skilled, but it's important that he knows these things that he should not know.
Oh, I just thought it was, oh, the player needs to be told this information. So let's have Joshua be the exposition.
It could be that, but I mean, Estelle also doesn't know it. This isn't common knowledge.
Oh, I didn't think there was anything nefarious by it.
I'm not saying anything nefarious. I'm just pointing out that this scene serves a narrative purpose about Josh's overall character arc. The other reason to spend some time on this mission is that this is these kinds of investigation missions, they're found throughout the entire rest of the series, especially in the crossbell games when you're playing the police, but they're in every game where you're given an area to run around and you pick up clues and you talk to people, and then the amount of extra BP you get is dependent upon you thinking to yourself and picking the correct answers when given a question. Or you can do what most people do and look it up on a guide so that you get the max amount of BP. Ain't no fault in doing that. I've certainly done that myself. But this kind of investigation mission, I think, is really fun because it puts you into the mindset of, I'm these characters, I'm trying to solve through this puzzle.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes for games to make the non-fighting, non-preparing, or optimizing fighting parts diverting, enjoyable, fun, what say you? But this, small, short interlude that's, a mystery, essentially. Also, then listening to the old point and click games of the 90s, it was good. It was done well. The clues were the right mix of obvious, but not too obvious. The rewards were good. It just goes to show how variety is really important for games in general.
Indeed. So go through.
That doesn't mean include a fishing minigame in a JRPG. More than that, more than the fishing minigame.
You're going to hate the series starting like in the next one when there is a fishing minigame. But they do the investigation. They discover, okay, it's Josette. We need to figure out where she went. You find a leaf that can only be found in the Mistwald Forest. So we head down there. We've probably already been there to do Father Divine's quest, but the game kind of acts as if Estelle has never been there before, which is a little bit of a, you gave us a side quest to go here. Why is this the first time we've been here? That doesn't make any sense. That's an oversight on Falcom's part, I think. But you go through the forest and you find Josette. And Kevin, what did we learn about Josette?
We learn that she has no, reservations about using gendered insults.
Yeah, okay, that is something that we learned. That's not the biggest thing that we learn about Josette.
Oh yeah, she has a private airship and is part of the mafia.
Yeah, she's a sky bandit, part of the Capua family. Yes, she also uses the word bimbo. That's important too. I have to say, the song that plays during the investigation and during this scene, I think it's called like "We Are the Capua Family." It is fucking bopping. Like, I love that song. It just makes you feel like you're doing nefarious things.
Just from the brief glimpses I've had so far, the soundtrack for this game seems really top-notch.
Yes, it is. I'll tell the readers or the listeners how good the Trail soundtracks are. I'm not a person who listens to music very much, to be honest. But when I really like something, then I really listen to it like all the time. And so I played the Trails games. I got into them. I found out I could get all of their songs through Spotify. So I put together I added them to my video game music playlist, and I proceeded to use that as my main studying and writing music. Then there's the Spotify Unwrapped end of the year thing, year in review. And it turns out that I was in the top 1% of all people on the face of the planet who listened to Falcom Sound Key JDK that year.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for, have a slapdash ho-hum average, soundtrack for video games, but a good music selection really improves playability.
Oh, it definitely enhances it for sure. Estelle and Joshua, they discover, these are actually sky bandits. This Josette is not from the Yanis Royal Academy and all of that. We also discover that the miner that had ran away actually caused this to happen in the first place. Like, intentionally so. Their goal was to steal the septium from the mine. It was only because he fucked up that they had to steal it from the mayor. But then we fight them. This is really the first boss fight that we have in the game. How did you find that? How did you find the boss fight?
Well, I died a couple times, so hitting the retry button, it got easier each time. So
You can turn that off, by the way, but I didn't know that when I played through the games, and it's a useful feature. I wouldn't turn it off.
I thought the way they programmed Gisette was really good to, buff her so when they were at low health to attack ours if they were all in good health, or if we were could be finished off or were close by. I thought that was good. It's a good mix of challenging but not frustrating, which can be very tough line to cross for any kind of gaming experience.
So we should inform the listeners that even though I've played all of the games, I'm playing on normal and you're playing on hard.
Yes.
So why did you decide to play on hard?
I usually do play on hard. Fire Emblem Three Houses, I play on Maddening. I don't like to be frustrated playing games, but unless it's a game where I just want the story, I like a bit of a challenge.
I hear you on that. I do think that Trails provides enough of a challenge that it's something I want to have to pay attention, but I don't want to be afraid that I'm going to lose and that I'm not going to be able to overcome it. If I lose once or twice, that's fine. But I don't want to hit a roadblock, which is why
soft locked.
Which is why I played these games on normal, because it gives me that level of difficulty. I agree with you on Fire Emblem Three Houses because that game on normal is boring, which is why I stopped playing it when I was doing my replay to do Blue Eagles, because my God, you can just dominate that game on normal without any effort whatsoever. You'd need to play that game on hard. But most of the time I play on normal. We beat this boss fight. We're about to take Josette and company into custody when a ship comes in, shoots some bullets, and it turns out, bam, it's Josette's brother Kyle with the ship to save them. And they reveal that something big is happening in the city of Bose or Bose. I'm not really sure how you pronounce it. And they're going that way too. Before this, we had run into Niall and Dorothy. They're heading there as well. So something big is happening in Bose, which means that, okay, we finished the mission, we reclaimed the prize, but we didn't arrest our perpetrators. We head back to the Bracer Guild to report this mission. And then what happens, Kevin?
So we're told that the ship that Estelle and Joshua's father, Cassius Bright, the big bracer in town, disappeared.
Yeah.
Whereabouts of the passengers, including Cassius, that's unknown. Joshua and Estelle, his teenage children, they're, really understandably shocked and horrified and saddened. They want to figure out what's going on with our father. Is he safe? And that provides the spark for the thrust of the rest of the game. Where is Cassius? What happened? What's going on?
Yes, I would say that is the emotional crisis that drives the player to want to keep going, because you've seen Cassius, right? You like Cassius. And the very least, you understand Estelle and Joshua's connection to Cassius. And then now they've lost Cassius. So now you feel for the characters. Now there's an emotional reason to keep going. But it's not the only reason why they have to travel around. So we finish this mission with the Sky Bandits, and we get the recommendation of the guild in Roland. And this is something that we have to get in every city in the Kingdom of Liberl in order to become senior bracers. So they kind of lay out, it's almost like a BioWare game in that they programmatically say you have to go to these 5 locations and, complete your main story and get this item. But we're going to be going around the city of Liberl in a circle. The next stop is Bose. So we know that Cassius' ship had been flying over Bose, disappeared. The Sky Bandits went over there because something big was happening. Niall and Dorothy was heading over there because something big is happening. Something big is happening over there. We are probably going to find out what that is.
They left off at the right mix of knowing enough, leaving enough plot threads dangling, and at almost 7 hours for me, the prologue to Trails in the Sky first chapter is done, and I cannot wait to get to chapter 1, the start of the main game. 7 hours in the start of the main game.
Yeah, the
But
last episode, I was like, oh, it's not going to take us any time at all. 5 hours, no problem. This is a beefy prologue.
But before that, we'll have our first sidebar episode coming out where we talk about something that's related to what we just played, talk about something that's important to the game and to gaming in general.
Yes, and we haven't decided what that is. We've tossed around a couple of ideas, but we haven't decided anything yet. So we'll find out what that is when we do it, and then it'll be in your feed when this releases. So Kevin, you like the prologue?
Good prologue, only complaint, maybe a bit too long.
A little bit too long, but I think it's also that it's not that long if you don't do the side quests, but you're going to want to do the side quests. We've only talked about one side quest here. We're going to only bring them up when they're interesting, and we're not always going to be doing the same stuff. I don't really know your philosophy on side quests. Mine is to do them. If they're there, I do them. I want that BP. I want that money. I want the experience. But sometimes it can get tedious, especially at the end. So that is why I think it has a lot of length, because it's not just the main story. It's okay, now run off to this area, do this side quest, now run back, report. Now go and do this side quest and run back and report. You can speed things up on the PC port, holding down the right trigger or whatever, because you use keyboard and mouse for some stupid reason. So I don't know what button is to speed up for you. But that can save you a lot of time too. Kevin, why do you use keyboard and mouse for this? It is like clearly superior with a controller.
Because I hate myself.
It must be. It honestly must be.
On that note, I'm signing off. Talk to you next time, Colin.
It was good talking to you. Everybody, thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next week for another episode. Bye-bye.